Welcome back, everybody, to the Minecraft Short Stories podcast. In this episode today, we have a listener story submitted by Chloe. And this story is 4 parts, which I'll be reading all of them on the podcast today, which is why this episode is so long. This story was submitted through my website, minecraftshortstories.com. If you want to submit one to maybe be read on the show, you can submit one on the Submit a Story page. And while you're there, I've recently been redesigning the website. The homepage is the first one to be redesigned, but I'm working on all the other pages too. Also, while you're on the website, you can find the Minecraft Short Stories Prologue podcast, which is a podcast where I just go over the stories that I've written. In the latest episode, I've just gone over the 500,000 place special story, Defend the Village. And this story was very interesting to do an episode about, because this story was the precursor to the Loyalty in the Rapids. Anyways, you can find all those links inside the description. The Prologue podcast is available to supporters of any tier on Patreon. Another thanks to Chloe, and I hope you guys enjoy. The story is titled The Child, and is by Chloe. Part 1. Steve caught his breath after his encounter with a rotting zombie, 2 bony skeletons, a creepy spider, and a purple particle enderman. As you know, Steve is a legend at killing infected zombies, rattling skeletons, spiders, and any hostile mob. Plus, saving villagers from raids. Steve was a hero. He was on his nightly run, well, he only goes every other night, of killing mobs for their extraordinary loot. All of a sudden, he spotted 2 skeletons right next to each other, as if they were protecting something. Steve, as you can guess, was curious. He wasn't really one for skeletons, as they were annoying, but his curiosity got the best of him. He made quick work of one skeleton, making it die in a puff of grey smoke. The second one seemed to have tears in its undead eyes before Steve demolished it with a slash of his ghoulish black netherite sword, making it disappear in a puff of grey smoke. With a sigh of satisfaction, he collected the 3 sharp-tipped arrows, 2 bones, and surprisingly, a bow in great shape. Steve looked around to see what the skeletons had been guarding. Steve's eyebrows shot up. On the ground before him was a small skeleton, seeming to be sleeping. That's weird. Skeletons don't sleep at night. I thought they only slept during the day. And this one is small, Steve said in surprise. That's when realization hit Steve like an arrow in the forehead. This was a baby skeleton. He had just murdered this young skeleton's parents. Steve turned as white as the skeleton himself. In fact, all the zombies, endermen, creepers, spiders, and other skeletons didn't even recognize him to be a player. He looked just like a regular skeleton with netherite armor. Steve knew he couldn't leave this poor baby skeleton. I mean, he had just killed this young skeleton's parents, so he had no right to leave it. He knew he couldn't kill it. That would be cruel. I mean, it was a baby after all, or it looked like one. He knew if he left the young skeleton, it wouldn't be able to leave the tree after the bright sun rose. And they were also in a forest, so he knew a hungry wolf would probably kill the poor thing. So, he decided he would take it with him. He knew he would have to go quickly, because he only had a few hours left until the sun rose and burned the baby to a crisp. And his house was quite a ways away. He would understand if the young skeleton didn't want to stay with him. I mean, if that skeleton had killed his parents, he probably wouldn't want to stay with the skeleton either. Steve picked up the cold, young, seemingly a baby skeleton. Steve started the long journey home, all the while thinking to himself, if only I hadn't killed those 2 skeletons, I wouldn't be in this situation. Feeling the regret, anger, and sadness, Steve carried the baby skeleton. He was sweating, his feet hurt, he was hot, even though it was a cold night, and he needed rest. He was pale the whole way, but he wasn't attacked by a single mob. He was on the gravel path that he had walked on for years. Only then did his face start to gain its color again. Why does this poor, innocent little baby skeleton have to wake up now? We're so close. Steve almost groaned out loud, but thought better. The eyes of the baby skeleton fluttered open. Who are you, and where are my parents? And where am I? Oh, you're a player. Where are my parents? Or I'm in danger. The young skeleton's eyes seemed to tell Steve. A few seconds later, the baby skeleton's eyes rolled back into its cold white skull, and his eyes shut. It started to breathe heavily. Steve saw that the young skeleton had fallen unconscious. Part 2. Steve was exhausted as he set the baby skeleton on the soft white bed of his guest room. The young skeleton was a lot heavier than he had thought. It felt as if he was carrying a block of obsidian. Thank goodness Steve was as strong as a raging ravager, but his arms still felt like floppy noodles. His stomach rumbled, and he himself needed to sleep. Steve knew he couldn't sleep though. He didn't want the baby skeleton running away and dying in the hot sunlight. Do baby skeletons even burn in sunlight? Steve thought. I mean, he was under a tree, so they might, he thought, sitting down next to the pure white bed. Steve shook his head in confusion. This was all so sudden, and everything was happening too fast. He couldn't handle it. The baby skeleton slept for 5 hours straight. Steve was nodding off when the skeleton started to move. Steve's heart skipped a beat. He needed answers, and he wonder if baby skeletons can speak English. I mean, I speak Spanish too, but I'm not that good at it. The skeleton's head started to move from side to side. It looked to Steve like the young skeleton was having a nightmare. He wondered if it was even possible for skeletons to have nightmares. I mean, they were his nightmares. He wondered if he was their nightmares. Almost as if the baby skeleton had super speed, it shot up and started to cry. It cried and cried. Steve was confused. He thought the baby skeleton would be grateful. Well, maybe not grateful, but he didn't think it would cry. Steve felt quite awkward. His face flushed red, and he tried not to look at the young skeleton. "I want my mommy," cried the baby skeleton in perfect English. Steve didn't know what to say. He didn't want to tell the baby skeleton that he had killed his parents. And his mommy? The baby skeleton sniffled. "Wait, you're a player." "Oops, I can't speak English. Clatter clatter," whispered the skeleton in a worried voice. "It's okay, I won't hurt you," whispered Steve. "Hey, where's Aunt Kidney and Uncle Skull?" "Oops, clatter clatter." "I think that's how you say in skellen," stated the small skeleton. "Wait, did you say aunt and uncle?" Steve inquired. "Yes, I was staying with my aunt and uncle at their tree." "Oh, darn, stop talking to a player, Sonny." "Great, now you've told the player your name. Just stop talking," yelled the skeleton Steve now knew as Sonny. Steve was absolutely shocked. He never thought this young skeleton would be so critical of herself or himself. "So your name is Sonny, Steve muttered. Sonny looked shocked. She didn't expect a player like Steve, who killed innocent mobs like herself, would be so kind to her. "Yes, my name is Sonny, and it's an unusual name for a skeleton, just so that you know." "And yours is what, Jackson?" Sonny snapped. "Okay, do you need any food or anything?" stammered Steve. "I'm only 8, but I can think for myself. And I don't think taking food from a stranger, let alone a player, would be a very wise choice. For me, at least," hissed Sonny. Part 3. "I won't hurt you, I promise," Steve shouted. He was quite annoyed because saying something multiple times to a person was quite annoying. Sonny was talking and talking. The girl skeleton was shocked and started to cry. "I'm such an awful and weird skeleton. My name is weird, I can't speak skellen, and I'm in a player's home," Sonny wailed. Sonny immediately stopped crying. "Wait, why am I even here?" she commanded. Steve stuttered. He knew he had to tell her the truth, one time or another. Steve started out slow. Pretty soon the whole thing just sort of spilled out. I killed your uncle and aunt, and when I realized what I had done, I knew I couldn't leave you. So I took you home with me." Steve trembled. Sonny had her mouth open and just looked at him, staring seemingly into his soul to see if he was telling the truth. "It's okay, I never really liked my aunt and uncle," she explained casually. Steve was crying now, something very rare. Steve immediately stopped crying. "Wait, when did you say your parents were picking you up?" "They're picking me up not tonight, but the next," Sonny said. "Don't you know what this means? I can take you to your parents and explain what I did." Steve rejoiced. Sonny now looked very excited. "What are we waiting for?" laughed Sonny. They started their long journey as the sun set, with Steve occasionally carrying Sonny on his back. Strangely, he wasn't attacked by any mobs again, although every mob looked at Sonny with disgust in their eyes. Even the younger ones, as Steve now noticed. Steve inquired, "Why do all the mobs look at you that way?" Sonny said, "Well, it's a long story." Part 4. Sonny started her seemingly long story with a sigh. "Well, it all started with my parents. They're weird and always have been," Sonny said, looking down with tears in her eyes. "What's so weird about your parents?" Steve said. "My mom is a skeleton, and my dad is a wither skeleton. So I'm a skeleton with black hands and feet. Plus, when I shoot an arrow, you get the withering effect. But when I touch you, you don't. It's just when I shoot an arrow." Sonny seemed to be breaking down before him. "And my name is Sonny. Sonny is like the sun. Hostile mobs hate the sun," wailed Sonny. "Oh, here we are," exclaimed Sonny, drying up her face that had tears all over it. "So your parents will be here tomorrow?" Steve questioned. Steve was trying to change the subject, because he could see that Sonny was having a lot of stuff going on inside her 8-year-old skeleton head. Or is it a skull? Never mind. Steve and Sonny were somewhat close now, only about 15 blocks from the tree. Steve was debating if he should tell Sonny about his parents, or keep quiet. I used to live in a village with my mom and dad. One day there was a raid. It was in the middle of the night. Pillagers, zombies, skeletons, creepers, and endermen. It seemed like every single mob was attacking us. That day, I lost my dad. My mom and I escaped. But pretty soon after, my mom got really sick, and a few days later, Steve flinched. I was 6 years old when my parents died. Don't take your parents for granted, Steve said with compassion in his eyes. Sonny mumbled. Right then, Sonny burst into tears. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take my parents for granted. It's just so hard. You don't get it, you're a player. There's a lot less of you and there's a ton of mobs. You know what? They all look at me with disgust. Sonny curled up in a ball next to the tree and started to cry. She cried and cried. No matter how much Steve tried to comfort her, she just cried. By the time she stopped crying, the sun was at its midpoint. Sonny sniffled as she dried her tears and asked Steve, Is it hard to be a player? No, not really. I mean, it's hard when things are attacking you, and it's hard when you're placed as a hero when you're the one who really needs saving, said Steve. They just sat there for about 6 hours. All of a sudden, they heard a rustle. He hadn't noticed it had become pitch black outside. That's when two skeletons, one black as the night itself, the other as white as snow, stepped out from behind a tree. Hey, who's your friend here? Belted the skeleton as black as night. Where's Aunt Kidney and Uncle Skull? Whispered the skeleton as white as snow with the voice of a songbird. Steve hadn't noticed he looked just like a skeleton. He had turned pale again. His cheeks flushed red, made an awkward sort of laugh. Yeah, that's my fault, said Steve looking at the ground. Oh, did you kill them? Great, my sister is crazy, said the skeleton that was white. My name is Steve, and I'm a player. Killed your sister, I guess? I took Sonny home with me because I knew I couldn't leave her, stuttered Steve. Well, we never really liked them, said the wither skeleton. You ready to go home? He said to Sonny. Bye, Steve. Maybe see you later, said Sonny. Yeah, bye. Nice to meet you, sang the skeleton as white as snow. Steve said goodbye with tears in his eyes, but he knew she couldn't live with him. He did know she would have a new appreciation for her parents. The end. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you to Chloe who submitted this great story. I enjoyed reading it. This is one of the longer stories that's been on the podcast. It's like over 2,000 words. So thank you for taking the time to write that and submit it. And thank you, the listener, to getting to this point inside the episode, assuming that you didn't skip to the outro for some reason. That would be a little bit strange. If you did do that, go listen to the story. It was great. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you will check out the links inside the description, maybe submit your own story. And I'll see you guys inside the next episode.